My name is Ashley Wilson, and at 29, I watched my family transform my wedding day into a nightmare of manipulation and betrayal. What my parents and sister didn't know was that my grandfather Mason had anticipated their schemes. While they were busy sabotaging my special day with Ryan, they had no idea that the real will was safely hidden, waiting to be revealed. As we escaped to our Maldives honeymoon, I held the ultimate truth that would change everything. Before I share how justice was finally served, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. Hit that like button, subscribe to my channel, and let me know in the comments if you've ever had to stand up to toxic family members. Trust me, what happened next will shock you. Growing up as the granddaughter of Mason Wilson meant two different worlds colliding in my life. On one side was my grandfather, kind, principled, and genuinely wealthy not just in money, but in wisdom. On the other side were my parents, James and Karen Wilson, along with my sister Natalie, who seemed to value only the status and luxury that came with the Wilson name. From an early age, I noticed the distinction in values. While my parents hosted extravagant parties at their suburban mansion and my sister paraded designer clothes through high school hallways, my grandfather lived in a modest home on a beautiful lake property. Despite owning several successful businesses and having considerable investments, Mason preferred simplicity and authenticity. Money is just a tool, Ash, he would tell me during our fishing trips at the lake. It's what you build with it that matters. Those weekends at the lake house became my sanctuary, the place where I learned to value substance over appearance. By the time I finished law school and began my career as an environmental lawyer at 25, the divide between my philosophy and my family's had grown into a chasm. My parents considered my career choice wasteful of my education. You could be making 3 times more in corporate law, my father would argue during holiday dinners. The Wilson name should be on downtown buildings, not protest signs. My mother would add her disapproving glance. Darling, no one important will take you seriously when you're dressed in those practical clothes. Natalie, 2 years younger, but somehow always positioned as the sensible daughter, had followed my father into investment banking. At least one of us understands the importance of appearance, she would say while showing off her latest luxury purchase. Grandfather Mason, however, couldn't have been prouder of my choices. You're fighting for something bigger than yourself, he'd say during our weekly phone calls. That's the true Wilson legacy I want to leave behind. When I met Ryan Mitchell at a hospital fundraiser 3 years ago, the divide grew even wider. Ryan, a 35-year-old pediatric surgeon, had grown up in a blue-collar family, worked his way through medical school on scholarships, and chosen pediatrics because kids deserve champions, even if it pays less than other specialties. His warm brown eyes, genuine laugh, and unwavering moral compass drew me in immediately. My family's reaction to Ryan was predictably shallow. A surgeon is acceptable, I suppose, my mother had said after our first dinner together. But a pediatric surgeon? That's hardly the most profitable specialty. My father was more direct. He drives a Honda, Ashley. A 5-year-old Honda. What will people think? Natalie didn't even attempt diplomacy. He's cute enough, but you could do so much better in our circles. Bradford Taylor has been asking about you, and his family owns half of downtown. But Grandfather Mason saw in Ryan what I did. During the holidays, while my parents were busy showing off their wine collection to neighbors, I found my grandfather and Ryan deep in conversation on the back porch. That young man understands value, Mason told me later that night. He reminds me of your grandmother's brother. Salt of the earth, clear vision of what matters. As my relationship with Ryan grew more serious, Grandfather Mason's health began to decline. At 84, his heart was weakening, and during my visits, I noticed him becoming more reflective, more intentional with his words. Family isn't always what we're born into, Ash, he told me during one of our last fishing trips, 3 months before our wedding date. Sometimes it's what we build for ourselves. 2 weeks later, he asked me to come alone to the lake house. There, in his wood-paneled study, surrounded by books and fishing photographs, he discussed his estate for the first time. There are things I need to arrange, he said, his voice weaker but his eyes sharp as ever. Things I need to protect. I tried to change the subject, uncomfortable discussing his mortality, but he was insistent. I've watched how they treat you, Ashley. I've watched how they treat Ryan. I need you to trust me in the coming months. Can you do that? I promised I would, though I didn't fully understand what he meant. Mason passed away peacefully in his sleep just 3 months before our wedding date. The family gathered at the estate for the reading of the will, performed by his longtime attorney Brett Jenkins. To everyone's surprise, the preliminary will divided the estate equally among me, my parents, and Natalie. That's strange, I whispered to Ryan during the reading. He always talked about targeted donations to the children's hospital and conservation groups. Ryan squeezed my hand. Maybe there's more to this, he said quietly, his medical intuition sensing something wasn't quite right. What we didn't realize then was how dramatically my family's behavior would change after that reading, and how it would culminate in the destruction of what should have been the happiest day of our lives. The transformation in my family's attitude toward Ryan after the will reading was both sudden and suspicious. My mother, who had previously referred to him as that doctor with the economy car, now called him our future son-in-law with practiced warmth. My father began inviting Ryan to golf outings, and Natalie actually followed him on social media, something she had refused to do for the 2 years we'd been dating. They're trying, Ryan said optimistically as we drove home from Sunday dinner a week after the will reading. Maybe your grandfather's passing has given them perspective. I wasn't convinced. They've never tried before. Why start now? The answer became clear when my mother called the next day, announcing she had taken the liberty of reserving the country club for our wedding reception. But Mom, we already put a deposit on the botanical gardens, I reminded her. Ryan and I want something simple and natural. Oh, darling, she replied with a dismissive laugh. The gardens are lovely for photographs, but hardly appropriate for a Wilson wedding. Besides, the country club had a cancellation, and I've already paid the non-refundable deposit. Your father would be so disappointed if we didn't use the club where he's been a member for 30 years. This was just the beginning. Over the next 2 months, every decision Ryan and I had carefully made was systematically undermined. The simple, elegant invitations we had designed were accidentally never sent to the printer. Instead, my mother ordered ornate gold-embossed cards that cost 3 times as much. My appointment with a sustainable bridal boutique was forgotten by my mother, who had promised to join me. Instead, she scheduled a private showing at an exclusive salon where she had already selected a ball gown with a cathedral train, the opposite of the simple sheath dress I had wanted. The intimate guest list of 120 was somehow misplaced, replaced by my parents' version that included over 300 people, many of whom I barely knew. Strangely, several of Ryan's close relatives and friends were missing from this new list. It must have been an oversight, my mother insisted when I confronted her. We'll make sure they're added right away. Somehow, the correct invitations never reached Ryan's family. The farm-to-table catering company we had selected was informed that we had changed our minds. In their place, my father had contracted the most expensive caterer in the city, featuring imported delicacies that would make Ryan's working-class parents uncomfortable about contributing to the wedding costs as they had offered. Your father is paying for everything now, my mother explained. It's his gift to you both. Ryan's parents shouldn't have to worry about a thing. What seemed like generosity was actually a power move, taking control away from us and diminishing Ryan's family's role in the celebration. 6 weeks before the wedding, I stopped by my parents' house to drop off some paperwork and heard laughter coming from upstairs. Following the sound, I froze in the doorway of the guest room. There was Natalie, wearing the wedding dress my mother had pressured me into accepting, twirling in front of the mirror while my mother applauded. It looks better on you than it will on her, my mother was saying. Maybe after the divorce, we can have it altered for your wedding to someone appropriate. They hadn't noticed me yet, and I stepped back into the hallway, my heart pounding. How long do you think we'll have to pretend to like him? Natalie asked. My mother's voice was cold. Your father thinks a year is sufficient. Enough time for Ashley to come to her senses or for us to convince her that a man from his background will never truly fit into our world. Did you see his mother's shoes at the engagement dinner? Natalie laughed. From a department store, I'm certain. I slipped out of the house, called Ryan in tears, and met him at our apartment. As I recounted what I'd overheard, his face grew serious. I've been noticing things too, he admitted. Your father took me to lunch last week and spent the entire time talking about prenuptial agreements and how they can be contested. It felt like a warning. That night, as we talked through everything that had happened since Mason's death, a disturbing pattern emerged. My family wasn't just taking over our wedding, they were actively working to sabotage our relationship. Something doesn't add up about your grandfather's will either, Ryan pointed out. He was specific about his wishes when we spoke. He told me he had made provisions for the children's hospital expansion. You're right, I realized. And he mentioned conservation trusts for the lake property. None of that was in the will Brett read. Despite our growing suspicions, we were weeks away from the wedding with deposits paid and arrangements finalized. Ryan, ever the voice of reason, suggested we proceed with the ceremony, but remain vigilant. If they're playing a long game, we need to be strategic too, he said, holding me close. Let's document everything. Your grandfather trusted you for a reason, Ash. Maybe we need to trust his plan, whatever it was. Little did we know just how ugly things would get before the truth would finally emerge. The morning of our wedding arrived with picture-perfect weather and an increasing sense of dread in my stomach. I had barely slept, haunted by dreams of my grandfather trying to tell me something I couldn't quite hear. My mother and Natalie arrived at the bridal suite in the country club at 9 a.m., bringing with them a hairstylist and makeup artist I had never met. But I already booked Shannon, I protested, referring to the bohemian-style artist whose natural approach I had loved during my trial session. She called with a family emergency, my mother said dismissively. Luckily, Genevieve was available. She does all the society brides. 2 hours later, I barely recognized myself in the mirror. My hair had been pulled into a severe updo that made my neck ache, and my makeup was so heavy I felt like I was wearing a mask. It's perfect for photographs, my mother insisted when she saw my dismay. Trust me, darling, I know what works for the Wilson face shape. As the bridesmaids, mostly Natalie's friends whom she had insisted I include, arrived for champagne, I retreated to the bathroom with my phone to text Ryan. His response was immediate and steadying. No matter what they do, by sunset you'll be my wife. That's all that matters. I love you. With renewed determination, I emerged from the bathroom to find Natalie rummaging through my wedding folder. What are you doing? I asked, noticing my carefully written vows were missing. Just making sure everything's in order, she replied with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Oh, and I've been meaning to give you this. I found it in one of boxes from grandfather's study that Dad brought home. She handed me a small velvet pouch. Inside was my grandmother's sapphire pendant. Something I had mentioned wanting to wear as my something blue. That's surprisingly thoughtful, I said cautiously. Natalie's smile widened. Well, it is your wedding day. Even I can be nice once a year. The ceremony was scheduled for 4 p.m. At 3, as I was being squeezed into the massive ball gown my mother had selected, my father knocked on the door of the bridal suite. Princess, I have a wonderful surprise, he announced, looking unusually pleased with himself. We're going to announce it during the reception, but I wanted you to hear it first. Your mother and I are selling the lake house. My heart sank. Grandfather's lake house? But that property has been in the family for generations. It's where he taught me to fish, where we had all our special talks. It's just a house, Ashley, my father said firmly. The developer is offering well above market value, and they're going to build luxury condos. It's what your grandfather would have wanted. Maximizing the investment. It was so blatantly false that I couldn't even form a response. Mason had fought against lakefront development his entire life, even establishing a local conservation group to protect the shoreline. I need a moment alone, I managed to say, my voice shaking. Don't wrinkle the dress, my mother called as I closed the bathroom door. Alone again, I fought back tears that would ruin the heavy makeup. Something about the sapphire pendant Natalie had given me felt wrong. Examining it closely, I realized it was a replica. The original had a small chip on the back from when my grandmother had accidentally dropped it. This stone was flawless. A knock on the door interrupted my thoughts. It was my cousin Heather, the only family member I had insisted on including in the bridal party. "Your vows," she whispered, handing me a folded paper. Natalie switched them. "These are the real ones from your folder." "What did she replace them with?" Heather grimaced. "Pages from your teenage diary. The entries about your crush on Justin Phillips from 10th grade. Before I could process this latest sabotage, it was time to line up for the ceremony. As I took my father's arm for the walk down the aisle, he leaned in and whispered, "Try to look happier. We have important clients watching." The ceremony itself was a blur. I focused entirely on Ryan's face. His steady gaze cutting through the chaos, his gentle hands as we exchanged rings, his unwavering voice as he promised to stand by me through whatever came our way. If he was bothered by the ostentatious surroundings or the hundreds of strangers watching us, he never showed it. It was during the reception that things truly fell apart. I noticed immediately that Ryan's parents, his brother, and his closest friends had been seated at tables in the far corner, behind a column that partially obscured their view. My family and their social circle occupied the premium tables near the dance floor. The first sign of trouble came during the appetizer course, when I overheard a waiter tell Ryan's mother that the special meal she had requested due to her dietary restrictions was unavailable. "But we confirmed it 3 times," she said, looking embarrassed as those around her were served. The waiter shrugged. "The order was changed yesterday. I can bring you a side salad." Then came the speeches. As maid of honor, Natalie took the microphone with a predatory smile. "For those who don't know me, I'm the sister who got the style jeans," she began, earning uncomfortable laughter. "Ashley and I have always been different." While I was winning beauty pageants, she was saving worms from puddles. While I was dating the quarterback, she was organizing petitions for the school cafeteria to use less plastic. What followed was 10 minutes of thinly veiled insults disguised as sisterly teasing, including several embarrassing childhood stories I had specifically asked her not to mention. "And now she's landed a doctor," Natalie concluded with a wink. "Not a plastic surgeon or a specialist with private patients, but still, at least he's a doctor." To Ashley and Ryan, may your love of economy cars and secondhand furniture bring you happiness in your cozy little future. As she sat down to scattered applause, my father stood up, already slightly drunk from the premium scotch he'd been drinking since before the ceremony. "When my Ashley told us she was dating a doctor, I had high hopes," he began, not bothering with any warm introduction. "I pictured summer homes and charity galas. Then we met Ryan, and well," he chuckled, raising his glass, "at least he's a doctor." I felt Ryan stiffen beside me as my father continued. "In all seriousness, the Mitchells may not be used to our way of life, but we welcome them to the experience. Who knows? Maybe some of our standards will rub off and Ryan will finally upgrade that Honda." As forced laughter rippled through the room, I watched Ryan's parents exchange pained glances. His father, a hard-working electrician who had sacrificed everything to put his sons through college, looked down at his plate. I leaned over to Ryan and whispered, "I'm so sorry." "Not your fault," he replied, his jaw tight. "But I'm starting to think your grandfather was trying to warn you about something bigger than wedding sabotage." During the awkward dinner that followed, I excused myself to use the restroom. Passing by the coat check, I noticed my father's suit jacket hanging on a hook. Acting on instinct, I checked the inside pocket and found a folded document. As I partially pulled it out, I saw the letterhead of my grandfather's law firm and fragments of what appeared to be a torn will, different from the one that had been read after his death. Before I could examine it further, I heard voices approaching and quickly pushed the paper back into the pocket. Ducking into a nearby alcove, I overheard my parents and sister in the hallway. "The prenup might be solid, but there are always ways around these things," my father was saying. "After seeing how pathetic his family is, I'm more convinced than ever that he's after the Wilson money." "Did you see his mother's face during your speech?" Natalie laughed. "Like a deer in headlights. These people don't belong in our world. Once the honeymoon is over, we'll start working on Ashley," my mother added. A few months of subtle comments about differences in upbringing, some well-placed concerns about their compatibility. She'll be filing for divorce by their first anniversary. And if not, there's always the real will to consider, my father muttered. Brett knows what to do if she doesn't come to her senses. Their voices faded as they returned to the reception. I stood frozen, pieces clicking into place. There was another will. My family knew about it. And somehow, they had convinced Brett Jenkins, my grandfather's trusted lawyer for 30 years, to participate in whatever scheme they were running. I rushed to find Ryan, my elaborate dress rustling as I moved through the crowded reception. He was standing alone near the gift table, watching the dance floor with a strained expression. "We need to leave," I said urgently. "Now. I'll explain everything, but we need to go." One look at my face told him all he needed to know. Without hesitation, he nodded. "Lead the way." In the chaos of the reception, with guests drinking and dancing, no one noticed as the bride and groom slipped out the side door, leaving behind a celebration that had never truly been ours. Ryan's Honda, the same one my father had repeatedly mocked, waited in the country club parking lot, adorned with the traditional, just married, decorations his brother had surprised us with. In any other circumstance, the sight would have made me smile. Now it represented escape. "The lake house," I said as Ryan started the engine. "We need to go to grandfather's lake house before they sell it." "Are you sure? What about our flight to the Maldives tomorrow?" "Trust me," I insisted, already working to remove the pins from my painful updo. "I think grandfather left something there for us to find." As we drove through the gathering dusk, I explained everything. The torn will I'd glimpsed in my father's pocket, the conversation I'd overheard, and the growing suspicion that my family had somehow manipulated my grandfather's final wishes. "That would explain why the will reading seemed so out of character," Ryan said, navigating the winding road toward the lake. "No specific bequests, no charitable donations, just a simple equal split." It didn't sound like Mason at all. The lake house stood silent and serene against the darkening sky, its weathered wooden exterior holding decades of memories. Using the key I'd kept since my grandfather's passing, we entered the familiar space that smelled of old books and pine. "We need to check his study," I said, kicking off the uncomfortable wedding heels and hiking up my voluminous skirt. That's where he kept everything important. Mason's study remained exactly as he'd left it. Fishing photographs on the walls, shelves lined with books on conservation and local history, his ancient desk dominating the room. Ryan and I began a methodical search, checking drawers, looking behind pictures, and scanning bookshelves for anything out of place. "What exactly are we looking for?" Ryan asked after 30 minutes of fruitless searching. "I don't know," I admitted, frustration mounting. "A document, a letter, something that would explain what's really going on." I sank into my grandfather's leather chair, the absurdity of the situation hitting me, still in my wedding dress, husband of less than 6 hours, searching for hidden secrets instead of celebrating our marriage. He would have put it somewhere I would think to look, I reasoned aloud. Somewhere that had meaning to us. My eyes fell on the fishing photograph above the fireplace, Mason and me, holding up a trophy-sized bass from the summer I turned 16. It had been a particularly significant catch because I had insisted on using my own hand-tied fly against his gentle advice to use a lure for that specific spot on the lake. Sometimes you have to trust your own instincts, even when more experienced people tell you otherwise, he had said when my unconventional approach proved successful. "That's the mark of true wisdom, Ash." I stood and walked to the photograph, lifting it carefully from the wall. Behind it was a small wall safe I had never seen before. "Ryan," I called, my heart racing. "I need a combination." Ryan joined me, examining the simple dial mechanism. "Any ideas?" I thought for a moment, then tried my birth date. Nothing. My grandmother's birth date. Still nothing. "What about the date you caught that fish?" Ryan suggested, pointing to the photograph. I smiled at his perception. June 16th, the year I turned 16. I dialed June 16th, 16, and the safe clicked open. Inside was a sealed envelope, a flash drive, and a legal document bearing the heading Last Will and Testament of Mason James Wilson. With trembling hands, I removed all 3 items and placed them on the desk. You should read the letter first, Ryan suggested, pulling up a chair beside me. The envelope was addressed simply to Ashley in my grandfather's distinctive handwriting. Breaking the seal, I began to read aloud. My dearest Ashley, if you're reading this, then you've likely discovered that things aren't as they seemed at the official reading of my will. I apologize for the deception, but after a lifetime of observing your parents' and sister's behavior, I knew I needed to take precautions. The document you found in the safe is my true will. The version Brett Jenkins read to the family was part of a test, one that, sadly, I predicted your family would fail. Brett has instructions to reveal the truth 1 month after your wedding, unless you contact him sooner using the phrase "the base flies in June." I wanted to see how your family would behave when they believed they would receive equal shares of my estate. Would they finally accept Ryan? Would they respect your wedding wishes? Would they show the character I've spent decades hoping they might develop? I suspect, since you're reading this before your honeymoon, that they've shown their true colors. The flash drive contains video documentation of conversations I had with your father in the months before my passing, conversations where he revealed plans to manipulate you and your inheritance once I was gone. Ashley, I've watched you grow into a woman of principle and compassion. In Ryan, you've found a partner who shares those values. The two of you understand what true wealth is. And it has nothing to do with country clubs or imported sports cars. The lake house is yours, as is the majority of my estate. I've established trusts for the children's hospital where Ryan works and for the conservation of the lake that gave us so many perfect days. Your parents and Natalie will receive modest trusts, enough to prevent a successful contest of the will, but not enough to fund the lifestyle to which they believe they're entitled. Trust Brett Jenkins. Despite what appearances may suggest, he has been following my instructions precisely. When you contact him, he will explain everything and begin the process of executing my true wishes. Remember our fishing trips, remember our talks, and know that I am so proud of the person you've become. Ryan is the partner you deserve. Never let anyone convince you otherwise. All my love, grandfather. Tears streamed down my face as I finished reading. Ryan, his own eyes damp, squeezed my hand tightly. He knew, I whispered. He knew exactly what they would do. Mason was protecting you, Ryan said softly. He was making sure you wouldn't be manipulated or controlled. We opened the will next, confirming everything the letter had described. The lake house and 60% of Mason's considerable estate were left to me. Substantial donations were directed to the children's hospital and local conservation efforts. My parents and Natalie each received trusts that would provide modest annual incomes, comfortable but far from luxurious. The flash drive contained video recordings of several meetings between my grandfather and my father in the months before Mason's death. In one particularly damning clip, my father could be clearly heard discussing plans to guide Ashley toward more suitable matches and ensure the Wilson fortune stays within the right circles once my grandfather was gone. We can use Ryan's background against him, my father had said callously. No prenup is unbreakable if you have the right leverage. My grandfather had simply nodded, allowing my father to reveal his true character while the hidden camera recorded everything. As the reality of the situation settled over us, Ryan pulled me into his arms, my elaborate wedding dress crinkling between us. What do you want to do now? He asked, always respectful of my agency even in the midst of crisis. I took a deep breath, sudden clarity washing over me. First, we're going on our honeymoon. We deserve that much. While we're in the Maldives, we'll contact Brett Jenkins with the code phrase and set everything in motion. Ryan smiled, that steady, warm smile that had first drawn me to him. From the Maldives? That seems fitting somehow. They tried to ruin today, I said, determination replacing my earlier distress. But they don't get to ruin our marriage or our future. We spent that night at the lake house, sleeping in the guest room that had always been mine during visits. The next morning, still wearing yesterday's clothes, we drove to our apartment, quickly packed for our honeymoon, and headed to the airport, ignoring the dozens of missed calls and messages from my family. As our plane lifted off, I felt a weight lifting too. Whatever confrontation awaited us upon our return, we would face it together, with the truth and my grandfather's wisdom. firmly on our side. The transition from wedding disaster to tropical paradise was surreal. One day I was fleeing my own reception in a massive ball gown. The next, I was walking barefoot on pristine white sand, the Indian Ocean stretching endlessly before me in shades of turquoise and azure. Our overwater bungalow at the Maldivian resort offered privacy and breathtaking beauty, the perfect setting to process everything that had happened and plan our next steps. On our first morning, as the sun rose over the calm waters, Ryan and I sat on our private deck with coffee, Mason's letter between us. The phrase is "the base flies in June," I reminded myself, reaching for my phone. I should call Brett now, while it's still business hours back home. Ryan nodded supportively, taking my free hand as I dialed the number for Jenkins Legal Services. After identifying myself to the receptionist, I was quickly connected to Brett's private line. "Ashley," he answered immediately, his voice a mixture of relief and concern. "I've been hoping you'd call. Are you safe? Your parents have been telling everyone you had some kind of breakdown at the reception." "I'm fine, Brett. I'm with Ryan in the Maldives." I took a deep breath. The base flies in June. There was a moment of silence, then an audible sigh. "Thank God. Mason said you'd figure it out. Where did you find it?" "The lake house." "Yes. Behind the fishing photo." "Perfect. That means you have the true will and the evidence." I've been maintaining the charade as Mason instructed, but it hasn't been easy. Your father has already begun the process to contest the preliminary will, demanding a larger share and accelerated distribution of assets. This news, while shocking, only confirmed what we'd discovered. "They're trying to sell the lake house, Brett." My father announced it during our reception. "They can't sell what they don't own," Brett assured me. The lake house was transferred into a separate trust 6 months before Mason's passing. They've been speaking with a real estate agent who's actually working for me, another part of Mason's plan to see how far they would go. The intricate layers of my grandfather's foresight were remarkable. He had anticipated every move my family might make and prepared countermeasures for each one. "What happens now?" I asked. Brett's voice took on a professional tone. "With your authorization, I'll begin executing the true will. The video evidence will be crucial if your family contests, which I expect they will. I'll need you to document everything that happened with the wedding as well, all the instances of sabotage, the conversations you overheard, everything." "They'll say it's just family disagreements over wedding plans," Ryan pointed out, leaning close to the phone. "How do we prove malicious intent?" "Mason thought of that too," Brett replied. "Start contacting your original vendors, the ones your family canceled or changed. Get written statements about who contacted them and what was said. I've already been quietly gathering evidence of your parents' financial activities since Mason's death. They've been quite busy making plans for money they don't actually have." After arranging to send Brett all the necessary documentation securely, we ended the call with a plan in place. For the next 3 days, between swims in crystal-clear waters and dinners under the stars, Ryan and I methodically documented everything we could remember about the wedding sabotage. The wedding planner we had initially hired before my mother took over confirmed via email that she had received a call from Karen Wilson claiming I had changed my mind about the entire aesthetic and would no longer require her services. The Botanical Garden venue manager forwarded an email from my father canceling our reservation, citing the bride's dissatisfaction with the accommodations. The farm-to-table caterer sent a copy of the cancellation form signed by my mother using my name. Each piece of evidence painted a clearer picture of deliberate interference and deception. But it wasn't until the 4th day of our honeymoon that we discovered just how far my family's betrayal had gone. "Ashley, you need to see this," Ryan called from the bungalow while I was reading on the deck. His tone made me rush inside immediately. On his laptop screen was an email from his brother Mike with an attachment, a social media post from Natalie. It showed a clearly photoshopped image of me crying hysterically at the reception, with the caption, "When the stress of marrying down finally hits. Prayers for my sister as she gets the help she needs." #mental health awareness, #family first. Accompanying the screenshot was a message from Mike. "This is all over their social circles. Your in-laws are telling everyone you had a nervous breakdown and Ryan took advantage by rushing you away from people who could help. They've been to your apartment building twice, trying to convince the manager to let them in for a wellness check. My hands trembled as I scrolled through more screenshots. My mother had posted a somber request for privacy during this difficult family time. My father had given a quote to the local society page claiming I had been under tremendous pressure and that they were working with medical professionals to ensure my well-being. They're trying to build a case that I'm mentally unstable, I realized, ice forming in my stomach. If they can convince people I'm not competent to make my own decisions, they could challenge your inheritance on grounds of mental capacity, Ryan finished, his medical background making the strategy instantly clear to him. It's despicable but clever. I called Brett immediately, forwarding all the screenshots as we spoke. I was just about to contact you, he said grimly. They've escalated faster than even Mason anticipated. Your father came to my office yesterday with a psychiatric consultant, discussing options for an evaluation when you return. Can they force that? I asked, panic rising. No, Brett assured me. You're a competent adult with no history of mental illness. But they're building a narrative, and if they can get enough people to express concerns about your behavior, they could make things very difficult, Ryan concluded. Brett cleared his throat. There's more. They've hired a private investigator to look into Ryan's background. Your father specifically asked him to focus on financial irregularities and prior relationships. Ryan's jaw tightened, but he remained calm. I have nothing to hide, but the invasion of privacy is unacceptable. I agree, Brett said. Which is why I think we need to accelerate our timeline. I've prepared all the necessary documentation to execute Mason's true will. With your permission, I'd like to move forward immediately rather than waiting for your return. We agreed without hesitation. Before ending the call, Brett added one final piece of advice. Document everything. Keep a journal of all communications from your family. Record phone calls if legally permitted. The more evidence we have of their behavior, the stronger our position will be. That night, as if on cue, the calls began. First my mother, her voice tearful and concerned. Darling, we're so worried. Whatever you think we did, we can work through it as a family. Please come home and let us help you. Then my father, authoritative and commanding, this childish behavior ends now, Ashley. You're a Wilson, and Wilsons don't air family disagreements in public. Return home immediately or there will be consequences. Finally, Natalie, her message dripping with false sympathy. Sis, everyone understands the pressure got to you. No one's judging. Just ditch the doctor and come home. Daddy's already talking to divorce attorneys who can keep this all quiet. I recorded each call, maintaining calm, non-committal responses that revealed nothing of our plans. After the third call, Ryan suggested we extend our stay in the Maldives for a few extra days, giving Brett more time to execute the will and prepare for the inevitable confrontation. The resort has availability, he noted, and we're safer here, away from their influence and potential manipulations. I agreed, grateful once again for his steady presence and clear thinking. We contacted the airline to change our return flight and settled in for an extended stay in paradise, the one now tinged with strategic planning and legal preparations. Over the next 4 days, Brett worked tirelessly back home, sending daily encrypted updates on his progress. The true will had been officially filed with the probate court. The preliminary will had been withdrawn with a formal explanation of its purpose as a test of character. The video evidence had been secured with multiple authenticated copies. Meanwhile, my family grew increasingly desperate in their communications. We've spoken with Dr. Lewis about residential treatment options, my mother texted. Very discreet, very comfortable. We can handle all the arrangements. Ryan's background check raised several concerns, my father claimed in a voicemail, not specifying any actual findings. We're only trying to protect you from a serious mistake. Your mental health exemption for the prenup is already being prepared, Natalie wrote, revealing their assumption that they could invalidate my marriage contract. No one will ever know. Each message, each call, Each text became another piece of evidence documenting their true intentions. What they didn't realize was that while they were building a false narrative about my mental state, they were simultaneously creating a perfect record of their own manipulation and deception. On our final night in the Maldives, Ryan and I sat on our deck under a canopy of stars, the gentle sound of waves providing a peaceful backdrop to our conversation. "Are you ready for what comes next?" Ryan asked, his fingers intertwined with mine. I considered the question carefully. I'm sad that it has to be this way. They're still my family, despite everything. But I'm ready for the truth to come out. I'm ready to honor grandfather's wishes and start our life together without their interference. Ryan nodded thoughtfully. Your grandfather saw this coming long before we did. He tried to give them chances to change, to see beyond money and status. And they failed every test, I concluded. Now they have to face the consequences. As the tropical night enveloped us in its warm embrace, I felt a strange mixture of grief and determination. The family I had grown up with had revealed themselves to be people I couldn't trust or respect. Yet, through that painful revelation, my bond with Ryan had only strengthened, and my connection to my grandfather's legacy had deepened. Tomorrow we fly home, I said, resting my head on Ryan's shoulder. And we end this on our terms. On Mason's terms, Ryan corrected gently. He's still looking out for you, even now. The thought brought tears to my eyes. Not of sadness, but of gratitude for the true family bonds that transcended even death. Whatever confrontation awaited us back home, we would face it with the strength of those bonds guiding us forward. Our return flight landed on a crisp autumn afternoon, the seasonal change during our extended honeymoon mirroring the transformation in our own lives. Brett Jenkins was waiting at the arrival gate, his familiar figure a welcome sight amid the uncertainty of what lay ahead. Welcome home, he greeted us warmly, helping with our luggage. Everything is in place for tomorrow's meeting. Your family believes it's about accelerating the distribution of assets from the preliminary will. They have no idea what's actually coming. The three of us drove directly to Brett's office, where we spent hours reviewing documents, practicing responses to potential arguments, and finalizing our strategy. Brett had reserved a conference room at his firm for the family meeting, selecting a neutral territory where we would have home field advantage. Get some rest tonight, he advised as we concluded our preparations. Tomorrow will be emotionally challenging, but legally, we're on solid ground. Ryan and I checked into a hotel rather than returning to our apartment, uncertain whether my family might be monitoring our home. That night, despite the comfortable surroundings, sleep came fitfully as my mind rehearsed various scenarios for the confrontation ahead. Morning arrived with a clarity that comes from absolute certainty. As I dressed in a professional navy suit, worlds away from the ornate wedding gown I'd last worn in my family's presence, I felt my grandfather's strength flowing through me. We arrived at Jenkins Legal Services 30 minutes before the scheduled meeting time. Brett had arranged the conference room strategically, a large oval table with Ryan and me positioned beside him at the head, facing the door. A projection screen was set up behind us, its contents hidden until the right moment. In an adjacent room, 2 court reporters and a videographer waited, ready to document everything. Your family just arrived in the lobby, Brett's assistant informed us at precisely 10 a.m. Shall I send them up? Brett nodded, his expression professional but determined. It's time. The door opened moments later, revealing my parents and sister, all impeccably dressed and wearing expressions of concerned superiority that faltered momentarily when they saw me sitting calmly beside Ryan. Ashley, my mother rushed forward, arms outstretched. We've been so worried, please take your seats, Brett interrupted smoothly. We have a great deal to discuss, and I've scheduled exactly 90 minutes for this meeting. My father's eyes narrowed suspiciously. What is the meaning of this setup, Brett? I thought we were here to discuss accelerating the asset distribution. In a manner of speaking, we are, Brett replied, gesturing again to the chairs across from us. Please, sit down so we can begin. Once they were seated, looking increasingly wary, Brett opened a folder and removed a document. Before we proceed, I need to inform you that this meeting is being recorded with video and stenography, as is standard for matters of significant estate execution. He gestured toward the discrete cameras in the corners of the room. Do I have everyone's acknowledgement and consent to this recording? My family exchanged glances before my father reluctantly agreed for all of them. I noted the momentary flash of worry in his eyes, the first crack in his confident facade. Excellent, Brett continued. Now, to business. I've called this meeting to execute the final will and testament of Mason James Wilson. We've already done that, Natalie interjected impatiently. 3 months ago. That's why we're here, to speed up the distribution. Brett smiled thinly. I'm afraid what we reviewed 3 months ago was not Mason's final will, but rather a preliminary document designed specifically as what Mr. Wilson called a test of character. He slid copies of the true will across the table. This is Mason Wilson's actual final will and testament, properly executed and witnessed 6 months before his passing. My father snatched up the document, his face darkening as he scanned its contents. My mother peered over his shoulder, her perfectly maintained composure beginning to slip. Natalie grabbed her own copy, flipping pages frantically. This is preposterous, my father finally sputtered. This can't be legal. We'll contest it immediately. You're welcome to try, Brett replied calmly, but I should inform you that Mason anticipated that response. Perhaps this will clarify his intentions. He pressed a button on a remote control, and the projection screen behind us illuminated with my grandfather's face. The video began to play. James, Karen, Natalie, my grandfather's voice filled the room, strong despite his evident physical weakness. If you're watching this, then you failed the test I set for you. The preliminary will you heard after my passing was designed to reveal your true characters. To see if the prospect of equal inheritance would finally inspire you to treat Ashley and her chosen partner with the respect they deserve. My father half rose from his seat, but Brett raised a hand, silencing him as the recording continued. Ashley has demonstrated the values I tried to instill in all of you: integrity, compassion, and the understanding that true wealth isn't measured in dollars. Ryan Mitchell possesses those same qualities, which is why I welcomed him into our family when you would not. The recording continued, with my grandfather methodically outlining his observations of my family's materialistic values over the years, their dismissal of my choices, and their transparent attempts to control my life for their own benefit. The true will you now hold reflects my actual wishes, he concluded. Ashley will inherit the lake house property and 60% of my estate. The Children's Hospital and Lake Conservation Trust will receive substantial donations. And you 3 will receive modest trusts that will provide comfort without excess, perhaps giving you the opportunity to develop the character you've thus far failed to demonstrate. As the video ended, silence filled the room. My mother was the first to recover, turning to me with tears that I couldn't determine were manipulative or genuine. Ashley, darling, you can't possibly want this. We're your family. Whatever disagreements we've had about the wedding, this isn't about the wedding, I interrupted, finding my voice. Although what you did there was merely the culmination of a lifetime of similar behavior. I opened a folder of my own, removing printed emails, text messages, and vendor statements. You systematically sabotaged every aspect of our wedding day. You canceled our chosen venue. I placed the Botanical Gardens email on the table. You replaced our caterer. Another document joined the first. You deliberately excluded Ryan's family from meaningful participation. With each piece of evidence I presented, my family's expressions shifted from indignant denial to calculating assessment of their position. Typical bridezilla behavior, Natalie attempted, her tone dismissive. Every bride thinks her wedding was sabotaged by someone. Perhaps, Brett interjected, but not every bride has vendors willing to sign affidavits about who actually made the changes. He added a stack of notarized statements to the growing pile of evidence, or recordings of family members discussing their intentions. He played a brief audio clip, my mother and Natalie talking about the wedding dress, the conversation I had overheard at my parents' house. You were spying on us? My mother gasped, genuinely shocked. No, I happened to overhear you plotting against me, I corrected. There's a difference. My father, ever the strategist, changed tactics. This is all very dramatic, but ultimately irrelevant. Family disagreements about wedding plans don't invalidate Mason's original will. True, Brett acknowledged. But this might. He played another video clip, this one showing my father in my grandfather's study approximately 1 month before Mason's death. Once you're gone, we'll need to guide Ashley toward more appropriate choices, my father was saying. The Mitchell boy is a phase. Once she has access to her full inheritance, we can introduce her to men of actual substance. My grandfather's voice, weak but clear, and if she's happy with Ryan? Happiness is temporary. Status and connections are permanent. Trust me, there are ways to ensure the Wilson fortune stays where it belongs. As the clip ended, my father's face had gone pale. Where did you get that? You were recording private conversations? That's illegal. Mason recorded those conversations with full legal disclosure, Brett countered smoothly. The camera was visible, and the room contained posted notice of recording, a security measure he had implemented years ago after several valuable items disappeared during family gatherings. You simply never bothered to notice. He turned to the stack of evidence before us. We also have documentation of your attempts to build a false narrative about Ashley's mental health following the wedding, your unauthorized visits to their apartment building, and your consultation with psychiatric professionals about having her evaluated against her will. My mother, desperately trying to salvage the situation, turned to Ryan. Surely you can see this is tearing the family apart. As a doctor, don't you want what's best for Ashley? A resolution that keeps everyone whole? Ryan, who had remained deliberately silent until now, spoke with quiet authority. What's best for Ashley is exactly what Mason wanted: freedom from manipulation and control. As her husband, I support her completely in this. As a doctor, I recognize emotional abuse when I see it. Emotional abuse. Natalie scoffed. Now we're abusive because we wanted a nice wedding? Because we have standards? No, I said firmly. You're abusive because you've spent years undermining my choices, dismissing my values, and attempting to mold me into a version of myself that prioritizes appearance over substance, just as you did with my wedding. At that moment, the conference room door opened and Brett's assistant ushered in 3 people I recognized instantly: the manager of the Botanical Gardens, the owner of the farm-to-table catering company, and our original wedding planner. These individuals have provided written statements, Brett explained, but they're also prepared to testify in person about the specific instructions they received from each of you. Instructions that directly contradicted Ashley and Ryan's expressed wishes for their wedding day. My father, recognizing the mounting evidence against them, switched to his final negotiating position. What will it take to end this amicably? Name a figure. The crude attempt at financial settlement. Treating the situation like a business deal to be closed confirmed everything my grandfather had observed about them. This isn't a negotiation, I said, my voice steady despite the emotion behind it. This is simply the consequence of choices you've made consistently over many years. Grandfather gave you multiple opportunities to demonstrate better character, and you failed each test. I stood up, Ryan rising beside me. The will is legal and binding. Brett will handle all further communications regarding the estate. Any contest will only result in the public disclosure of all this evidence, something I don't think any of you want. My sister, her composure finally breaking, slammed her hand on the table. This is so typical. Perfect Ashley, grandfather's favorite, getting everything while the rest of us are treated like villains in some melodrama. Her outburst seemed to trigger something in my mother, who turned to her sharply. Be quiet, Natalie. Your constant antagonism toward your sister is part of what got us here. If you hadn't insisted on that ridiculous maid of honor speech, if you hadn't switched her vows with her diary entries, you told me to do that. Natalie shot back. You said it would be a funny prank that would put her in her place. I never said to humiliate her in front of hundreds of people. And it was your idea to try on her wedding dress enough. My father's voice cut through their escalating argument. He turned to me, his expression hard but defeated. You've made your point, Ashley. We underestimated you and Mason. He stood abruptly. Come, Karen, Natalie. Our attorneys will be in touch, Brett. As they gathered their belongings, I felt a strange mixture of sadness and liberation watching the family I had grown up with preparing to exit my life, at least in the controlling, omnipresent way they had always inhabited it. At the door, my father paused, turning back with one final attempt. The lake house has been in the Wilson family for generations. Regardless of legal ownership, it's part of our shared heritage. I hope you'll consider that before making any decisions about its future. I met his gaze steadily. I will honor the property and its history the way grandfather did, by protecting it from development and preserving it for future generations who value more than just its monetary worth. With that, they departed, leaving behind the heavy silence that follows significant endings and precedes new beginnings. Brett looked between Ryan and me. You did well. Both of you. Mason would be proud. As we gathered our documentation and prepared to leave, I felt the weight of the confrontation lifting. Whatever legal challenges might still lie ahead, the truth had finally been spoken aloud, and there was no returning to the old patterns of manipulation and control. Outside Brett's office building, Ryan and I stood in the autumn sunshine, facing each other in the first quiet moment we'd had since the meeting began. "Are you okay?" he asked gently. I considered the question carefully, searching my feelings. "Yes," I finally answered. Not happy about how things turned out with my family, but at peace with standing up for the truth. For us. Ryan smiled, that steady, reassuring smile that had been my anchor throughout everything. "Then let's go home." Our home. And start building the life your grandfather believed in. Hand in hand, we walked toward our future, leaving behind the wreckage of old expectations and embracing the freedom to define family on our own terms. 6 months passed like turning pages in a new chapter of life. The lake house, once a weekend retreat, had become our permanent home after extensive renovations that preserved its rustic charm while updating its functionality. Large windows overlooking the water now filled the space with natural light, and my grandfather's study remained largely untouched, a sanctuary of memories and wisdom. The legal aftermath of our confrontation had unfolded much as Brett predicted. My family initially filed to contest the will, but quickly retreated when their attorneys reviewed the extensive evidence against them. The settlement conference had been brief and decisive, with my parents and sister accepting the trusts established in the true will, modest by their standards, but more than generous by any objective measure. On a perfect spring afternoon, Ryan and I hosted a small gathering on the dock extending into the lake. Unlike our original wedding, this vow renewal ceremony included only people who truly cared about our happiness: Ryan's parents and brother, a handful of close friends, and Brett Jenkins, who had become more than just our attorney. "I take you, Ryan, as my husband once more," I said, holding his hands as the setting sun painted the water in shades of gold and amber. Not in a celebration designed by others, but in this place that represents authenticity and true values. I promise to build our life on that foundation, honoring not what others expect of us, but what we know to be meaningful and real. Ryan's vows echoed similar sentiments, his steady voice carrying across the water as fish occasionally jumped nearby, nature's own applause for our commitment. After the simple ceremony and intimate dinner that followed, I found myself sitting on the dock with Sarah, Ryan's mother. Her warmth and straightforward kindness had been a healing presence in my life these past months. "I've been meaning to tell you," she said, watching Ryan laughing with his father and brother near the fire pit. "What you did, standing up to your family like that, it took real courage." I shook my head slightly. "It doesn't feel like courage when you have no other choice. It just feels like survival." Sarah patted my hand. "That's what courage usually is, dear. Not grand gestures, just doing what needs to be done when it would be easier not to." The wisdom of her words reminded me of my grandfather, making me smile. "Thank you for raising such a good man," I told her. Mason saw it immediately, Ryan's character. That's why he trusted him. Trusted us. 2 weeks after our vow renewal, an unexpected email arrived from Natalie. Unlike my parents, who had maintained rigid silence since the settlement, my sister's message showed the first crack in the family's united front. "Ashley, I've been doing a lot of thinking. Maybe some therapy too, but don't tell mom and dad. I'm not ready to say I was wrong about everything, because I still don't think I was. But I am ready to admit I was wrong about Ryan and about how we handled your wedding. Seeing you at the lake house during the legal meetings, you looked different. Stronger, I guess. Not like someone having a breakdown or making a mistake. Like someone who knew exactly what she wanted. I miss grandfather's lake house. I miss the person I was when we were there as kids, before designer labels and country club memberships became my whole personality. I don't expect forgiveness or even a response. Just wanted you to know I'm thinking about things differently these days. Nat, I showed the email to Ryan that evening as we sat on the porch swing that had been my grandfather's favorite spot for watching sunsets. What do you think? He asked after reading it twice. Is it genuine? Parts of it, I decided after careful consideration. The Natalie I grew up with is still in there somewhere, beneath all the social climbing and status anxiety. This feels like a first step, at least. Are you going to respond? I nodded slowly. I think so. Not with open arms, but with an open door. Maybe coffee somewhere neutral in a few weeks. Baby steps. My parents' response came much later and far more tentatively, a formal card on my birthday with a brief handwritten note suggesting they would welcome the opportunity to move forward as a family. No apology, no acknowledgement of past behavior, but a small olive branch nonetheless. I stored the card in my grandfather's desk drawer, neither accepting nor rejecting the overture, giving myself permission to process my feelings without rush or pressure. Meanwhile, Ryan's career had flourished in unexpected ways. Using part of the trust funds my grandfather had established for the Children's Hospital, he had developed an expanded pediatric care program for underserved communities. His promotion to department head had come with the freedom to implement innovative approaches to healthcare access. Mason's money is doing exactly what he hoped, Ryan told me one evening as we reviewed the program's initial success metrics. Creating change that matters, not just sustaining privilege. My own career had evolved as well. I'd established the Wilson Environmental Foundation using a portion of my inheritance, focusing on protecting watersheds and lake ecosystems throughout the region. The work connected me to my grandfather's values while allowing me to build something meaningful in his memory. 1 year after our wedding day, I stood at the end of the dock at sunset, reflecting on everything that had changed. The betrayal still stung when I allowed myself to dwell on it, but those moments came less frequently now. What remained was a deeper understanding of both family dynamics and my own resilience. Ryan joined me, wrapping his arms around me from behind as we watched the light play across the water. "Penny for your thoughts," he said, resting his chin on my shoulder. "I was thinking about something grandfather once told me," I replied. "He said that family isn't always what we're born into. Sometimes it's what we build for ourselves." Wise man. He also said that the true measure of wealth isn't what you own, but what you value. I turned in Ryan's arms to face him. By that standard, I think we're the richest people I know. Ryan smiled, the same smile that had steadied me through every storm. Your grandfather saw in you what I see every day, someone who knows the difference between price and value. As darkness settled over the lake, fireflies began their nightly dance among the trees, nature's reminder that even in darkness, light finds a way to shine. We walked hand in hand back to the house that had become our sanctuary and the center of our chosen family. The journey from that disastrous wedding day to this peaceful evening had taught me lessons I would carry forever. That standing in your truth requires courage, but brings freedom. That family can be redefined on your own terms. That sometimes the greatest gifts come disguised as losses, and that love, when built on mutual respect and shared values, can withstand even the most elaborate attempts to undermine it. I often wonder what my grandfather would think of how everything unfolded. In my heart, I believe he would be satisfied, not with the pain the revelation caused, but with the truth and authenticity that emerged from it. His final gift wasn't just the inheritance or the lake house, but the opportunity to define my life on my own terms, free from manipulation and false expectations. As I look to the future, I'm grateful for all of it, the painful revelations, the difficult confrontations, and the new beginnings they made possible. I'm grateful for Ryan's unwavering support, for Brett's principled guidance, and most of all, for my grandfather's wisdom and foresight. If there's one thing I've learned through this journey, it's that sometimes you have to lose the family you thought you had to find the family you truly need. And sometimes, sending the real will from a paradise island with the person who truly loves you is the perfect way to start that process. What about you? Have you ever had to make difficult choices to protect your future happiness? Have you discovered that family is sometimes defined by love and respect rather than blood? Share your experiences in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe if this story resonated with you. Your support means the world to me as I continue to share the lessons I've learned about finding authentic connections in a world that often values appearances over substance. Thank you for being part of my journey, and I wish you the courage to create a life that honors your own true values.